Good morning, everyone. Welcome to session 2 of our 3-part series, Navigating the New Landscape of Food Processing. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on operational efficiency. You will see on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a questions box. Please feel free to ask away throughout the presentations, and we will endeavour to answer all your questions during the Q&A session at the end. If we don't get to all of them, we will respond to you personally via email afterwards, and you will all be sent a recording. Dilly, over to you.
Good morning all, and may I also share our sincere welcome to you to the second session of our series of Navigating the New Landscape of Food Processors. For those of you that were on our previous session, you would remember that that session was aimed at the executives and owners of food processing companies, and we focused a lot on the state of the economy, the impact that this has had on your businesses, and shared with you some case studies internationally where between Aptin and Rifle Shot, we were able to assist these companies. The session today is the second of 3 sessions, and we would be focusing and drilling deeper down into the operational side of the organization. We have an excellent lineup of speakers with you this morning, and I'd like to start by introducing our first speaker, who is Nigel Noble. Nigel is a key accounts executive of Rifle Shot Performance Holdings. Nigel comes with a very impressive track record. He's been in business and specifically in the IT industry for some 47 years in several countries around the world, spending lots of time in South Africa and Africa. And over the last several years, Nigel has had a special passion for focusing in the food processing sector that are largely recipe-based. I hand you over to Nigel Noble.
Dilly, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Good morning. I think we all recognise that customer demands and purchasing patterns are changing, which requires us to look at our production process and its optimisation. We do need to streamline and optimise, but we also need to protect quality with a high yield. In addition, we do need to be consistent, clean and secure with reliable equipment, and avoid failures that can compromise large quantities. There are many factors that require focus, but hopefully I can set a common base for today's discussion. The first area is we do need to keep up to date and know the market demands. Trends do change and often last just a few months, and we need to keep track of those. And recently we've seen things like vegan diets, a focus on less salt and sugar content, which changes the demands. The pandemic will also shift eating habits. We'll be returning to home-based entertainment, which will drive new products and a product mix. There will be new SKU ratios between small and large, long and short shelf lives, and that will require additional flexibility on the production line. One of the things we do need to look at is doing the forecasting method. We need to embrace predictive analytics to predict future demand, avoid excessive inventory and unnecessary production runs. Spreadsheets do not provide that flexibility or provide real-time decision-making tools. In addition, we do need to use automatic systems to simplify stock, inventory management and supply chain management. This is to avoid production delays and to make sure we run to plan. Inventory management software today monitors availability of ingredients, maintains minimum inventory levels, and alerts before shortages occur. It should also provide real-time order placement with suppliers, and automation and artificial intelligence does support this. Meeting our customers' needs does require full visibility and control of the supply chain, from managing procurement, tracking inventory, shipping, purchasing, goods returns, and that each of these processes runs in a timely manner. It also ensures that no products are out of date or unsuitable for consumption, and that full and timely traceability is in place. We also need to make sure we're performing periodic maintenance and embracing predictive maintenance. This requires the implementation of an asset management system that will ensure that all equipment and tools are assessed regularly and issues addressed swiftly. We should also be embracing smart monitoring with sensors technology, which is part of the Internet of Things. Having replacement parts and processes in place improves handling of unscheduled inevitable inevitable downtime. You do need to ready your plant for risks, including contamination. This was well covered by Dr. Lucia Analik in our previous webinar, reinforcing the practice of good hygiene and only using equipment intended for food and beverage manufacturers. Over and above that, we need to enhance the quality control procedures. Food recalls, shoddy goods, poor packaging, and therefore negative public perception quickly erodes reputation of any business. We need to have digitized processes for inspection and compliance with industry and government regulations for both safety and sanitation. On top of this, it's important that the employee training and education is in place to support this. It is estimated that 48 million per annum worldwide get sick due to foodborne illnesses. There are many factors, but improper storage and handling are probably the two most important. The onus is on workers across the total supply chain to make sure they're receiving food safety training and proper handling protocols are in place and are critical. Many of these requirements are actually now regulated. Additionally, we need to automate what we can, increase the use of automation and integration. Use our labour in advanced complex tasks. Let automation replace redundant processes requiring little supervision. It never gets tired, it reduces errors and increases uptime. And finally, I'd just like to talk to manufacturing execution systems. Optimizing the production process will improve much in the business, specifically sales and customer satisfaction, and therefore all processes need to be reviewed and improved. Automation and digitization will help food and beverage production by automating labor-intensive and time-consuming operations. It will also provide real-time actionable data on all aspects, including production planning, purchasing management, inventory management, asset management, customer management, and supply chain management. That's a lot of management, but it is required. To effectively impact the top and bottom line, we either need to produce more with the same resources or the same with less resources, or a mix of both, depending on market conditions. Automation and digitization supports these objectives and desired outputs. I hope and trust that sets the base for the following discussions today. With that, back to you, Dilly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel. I think that was an excellent overview of the food processes entire value chain. I would like to introduce our next speaker, Ian Huntley. Ian is the co-founder and currently the CEO of Rifle Shot Performance Holdings, that he, together with Guy Imbert, established in 2001, and has since grown to be a trusted and dependent advisor to some of the key industrial and manufacturing companies in sub-Saharan Africa, and also recognized globally in Europe and in the US. Ian is also the co-founder and the initiator of a methodology that is called MAP, that stands for Manufacturing Accelerator Program, and Ian will touch later on around the value add and the complementary value add to food processes. Ian has over 45 years of business as well as IT and industrial and manufacturing experience, a well-respected individual in the manufacturing associations. Being so close to the manufacturing industry, Ian is also very passionate about motor vehicles and motorbikes. So Ian, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Dilly, and welcome to everybody on the call today. I'd like to start with a follow-on from what Nigel covered. He covered a lot of the why, but what goes beyond the why? The how. or most companies, they've struggled to deliver the results that are promised because they fail on the how. So I'm going to look in this short talk today at some of the hows. First of all, the 3 useful questions. Number 1, where are you going? Do you know? Where are you now? Maybe that's a useful place to start. And lastly, what do you need on the trip? Do you need a map book? Do you need to build bridges? Do you need to do training? Do you need to restructure? There are probably lots of questions on here that need to be addressed, and all of them critical. Otherwise, you won't know how to get from where you are now to where you're going. When we look at the structure, I believe in a methodology that starts with top-down design as number 1, getting to what I call the credibility limit. This is where these piles of Excel spreadsheets live. And with Excel, as Nigel pointed out, you can't run a business, not in real time, not effectively, and you don't have enough time to do all the scenarios. So that is the credibility point in your business where the information starts getting lost and you start losing profits. And thirdly, build it from the bottom up. So you start from the top, work down, what is it? Where do I want to go? What does the scenario look like? Where are my points where I'm losing the plot, losing the credibility? And then start building from the solid foundation to the top. So one of the methods we use is the CMMI maturity matrix, which stands for the whole maturity. And this is assessed at multiple levels within an organization, down at the shop floor, at the supervisory level, at the management level, and then of course at the planning and executive level. How mature is the organization and how ready is the organization for these levels to be connected? Now, I'm not expecting you to read all the fine print, but essentially if we start at the bottom, that's the initial point in time where process is unpredictable, they're poorly controlled, they're very often reactive. In some cases, management didn't even know they happened, and it probably rings true in your organization. The next level up is a managed point, where we're starting to plan some of these processes and control them at a departmental or workstation level. Third up is where we're defining them. We're defining them across the supply chain because everybody has a point to play within the supply chain. Are they connected? Are they working in harmony? Are they working in real time or quasi-real time? And then, of course, you get the quantitative measurements. And are you holding people to account at each of these levels? And then, of course, optimization. Now, before I move on to the next one, I often get called to bring in planning optimization, advanced planning, whatever, linear programming-based solutions, which, of course, we do. But if your base data from your initial and your managed level is incomplete, not up to date, or blatantly incorrect, no matter what you do at the optimization level, you're probably going to make the situation worse. And of course, these need to be structured from level 3, the defined level, in harmony up and down the organization. There's a lot of noise about industrialization. 1IR, Industrial Revolution, Second Industrial Revolution, Third, and of course, Fourth Industrial Revolution. And to the point I was making around optimization earlier on, if you aim at fourth industrialization without going through the previous steps, you're probably going to have a mess. You're probably going to go out of business. So some of the items that I'll show you on the next slide is moving from no industrialization, and I'm not talking moving from the steam environment into regular process. I'm talking about getting to process reliability. Are we consistent? Do we make the same sort of stuff? Do we have quality and dependability for our second level? With those, they become the foundation for speed and flexibility and reducing cost. And then you can start looking at the interconnected cones, and I'll talk about cones shortly, of codependency, which is in the blockchain. Next. So I was party and very lucky to be party to some research in the mid-80s around what created the whole ISO hierarchy of standards. Now, at the time, American companies were being, and European companies were being taken apart by the then Japanese. And part of the study looked at what was happening. And the first thing that the Japanese were doing, as we all know, it's in the history books, they focused on the process capability, the reliability of process. Do I know what's going on? Then they added the cone of quality on top of, and then dependability, speed, flexibility. And one of your outcomes thereafter is improved cost. So if we show it another way on the next slide. Oops, I left one out here. So let's stay this. So as you're walking up this path, you're building a foundation. You're digging the foundations, you're building the strength, you're adding the processes, you're making them reliable so that if a change in customer spec, in market regulations happens, there's a new capability required out of your process, you can move quickly. So let's move on to the implementation stage journeys. Now we're going to cover this much more in the follow-up presentation that we're going to do in what I call the Zen of implementation. So Rifle Shot's professional services team, together with our OEMs, is here to guide you on a journey that preps you for the change, that takes you on the journey, predicts the surprises, and prepares for the benefit realization. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ian. I think that was an excellent overview of where companies currently are, and if they're aspiring to be world-class, is what are the steps to achieve things like participating in the fourth industrial revolution. Ian, you also touched a little bit on CMMI, which stands for the Capability Maturity Model Integration. So for those of you who are participating, should be looking at what is the capability of your employees within the organization, what is the maturity levels, and how do I integrate this across the entire organization? I'm very excited to introduce you to our next speaker. Our next speaker is our keynote speaker, Miguel Escudero, who is based in Madrid in Spain. Miguel, we welcome you this morning. Miguel is an executive with Aptean, and for those of you in our previous session, you would remember we had James Wood, who is an executive based in London with Aptean, and he gave you some very good input of some case studies in other parts of the world that have benefited from using the expertise and solutions from Aptean. Miguel has been with Aptean for over 18 years. He has several years global experience in the food processing and manufacturing sector. His personal likes are walking in the fresh air in the mountains in Spain, and he's a bookworm. He loves reading. So Miguel, with that, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Dili, and thank you to all of the attendants. I hope you, your families and friends are healthy and safe. To begin with, it's not a secret that the world is transforming. We have seen it happen in our personal life with rise of mobile technology, social media, connected devices at home. The world is transforming in the manufacturing space as well. In fact, many of the trends we are seeing as consumers are converging at the same time in the manufacturing world and are reshaping the way business is conducted. In the last years in Europe and worldwide, the cost of the operations is rising. Cost of the raw material, cost of the energy, cost of the logistics, etc. And simultaneously, the demand is, let's say, decreasing. And this implies that margins are shrinking as well. So manufacturers need to contain cost, making sure they have visibility into all the issues to address quickly. Another interesting ingredient is the technology that brings the easy hyperconnectivity between devices within the factory, making it more intelligent. As machines acquire more and more intelligence, the idea of so-called Industry 4.0 is starting to become a reality, where new concepts appear like EOT, artificial intelligence, AI, augmented reality, gesture control, and many other things. So in this environment, COVID-19 brings us a new scenario. COVID is here and is here to stay. The point is how we will return to normality in the coming months, how the curve will look like and what shape it will have. But the answers depend on us, as it will depend on whether we apply tools and procedures to recover the original trend in red, green, or yellow path. But here is a positive point. According to Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, each government must make its own decisions about population's policies, but everyone must be aware that nutritional status, food and services availability must increase faster than the population. The challenge is the rural transformation and the improvement of the agri-food industry of countries that it's essential in terms of food security, quality, and efficiency. So in the next slide, you will see 5 actions that many companies are considering due to the impact caused for the pandemic. The first one, more flexibility implies improving collaborations between, let's say, entities, employees, customers, suppliers, the supplier of the supplier, and so on, and making network more fluid and developing virtual work environment. The second one, supply chain. Supply chain must rely on platforms with capability in artificial intelligence and machine learning, while ensuring the transparency, traceability, and security of the entire process. They improve to the response to capacity and resilience of the supply chain. During the crisis of this pandemic, people look to their leaders for compassion, care, and trust. They have to guide the company into the future with a list of immediate actions that managers must implement with people in mind. Proactive. So proactive is to take actions about how to reduce the risk of the people, how to reduce the volume of contacts to control the average waiting time. How can I automate tasks quickly? How can I boost my digital channels? How can I manage our professionals if they can no longer go to work, or at least part-time? Companies that had viewed digital commerce as a secondary channel must now reorient with a deep digital mindset every aspect of their business. It is the opportunity to double the commitment to e-commerce, expanding the offering and creating new lines of service with security, quality, service, and after sales. As you can see in the next slide, it's It's crucial that manufacturing transform their operations and their way of thinking to a new world of integrated systems and intelligent analytics. It's jumping to a new era of digitalizations with more visibility, more security, more proactivity, more interconnectivity, etc. As a result of this transformation, we can, let's say, let's go to manufacturing mesh and see some screenshots that illustrate what can we have to what we have discussed. So with an online visual factory, you can take better decisions based on what is happening in the plant, regardless where am I located. I can zoom in, zoom out on the graph of each production line to identify any problem at the moment it happens, when the line stopped, what was the reason, how often during the day, how long the stoppage or slowdown takes, etc. In the next slide, you can see online quality and control events and SPC charts that inform to the operator of how the process is trending. And factory can alert to the users when the process is out of control. This data comes from external signal, from any device, or from manual entries. In this instance, we are looking at the field weights, but this could be temperatures, microbiological data, torque speeds, or other variables. Next. But quality is not only the capability to take control of manufacturing process and environmental data from any device and visualize it. It is to control the whole process, for instance, the sanitation process. We can control every step during the sanitation, comparing standard data versus actuals, and control deviations, and sending alerts to the appropriate users if the result exceeds the accepted boundaries. In the next, we can see with the challenges of COVID, we can illustrate how factory mesh helps to make sure your workers are arriving healthy to work, providing all the information that is needed. It's easy to configure any type of checks to fit your specific needs for tracking worker health. These checks are configured and can be triggered to alert users to do the checks when it should be done, and can be automatically linked to any device. In this case, it's a thermometer, but can be instructions, videos, documents, etc. Next. So you can see Factory Mesh is screensaver to display important information on TV, so workers can be updated on production's metrics and COVID-related information and precautions to be taken. Next, please. Because as a summary, hyperconnectivity is a market trend that is aligned with many industrial protocols and implies with any of the regulations in the process industries such as FDA, GMP, GLP, HACCP, etc. Hyperconnectivity enables paper removal, increased security, and hides productivity. Hyperconnectivity minimizes the risk of COVID contagions because employees can work anywhere with any system more efficiently with very little but high quality interaction. Imagine a director taking information and decisions from the plant from different systems that are simultaneously connected. Imagine all kinds of scenarios: augmented reality for repairs, quality controls that are automatically triggered when a secondary variable is out of control. As you can see, we are closer to the so-called automatic factory, fully and better controlled. This is what is being a reality in Europe. But let's see an example of a case study, also in Europe. So in the next slide, Importacon needed to increase their output in a short-term period as their demand was growing around 5 to 10%, according with Fernando Lázaro, operations manager. So in the next slide, let's begin with what background they have in their factory. they was running 17 production lines for snacks. They need to increase around 5–10%. And the rising cost for raw material, energy and cost and logistics was a fact. And simultaneously, the increase of sales, at the same time, the prices was down. So because of this type of pressure, it was a lot of pressure between productions, sales departments, quality and security protocols. So going to the next slide, what they was looking for, basically, as we said, is increase the productivity. The first year, just 5% to meet the requirements, obviously. So what the premises they had, the deployment should be quick because the demand is there. The ROI should be in a short period of time. Customers cannot be affected for the decision and its implementation. And any alternative should allow the company to grow now and in the coming years. So what alternatives they have? They propose two alternatives, which is increase the current productivity using a MES tool or to buy a new line. As simple as this. So in the next slide, they put some number on these alternatives. Buy a new line. The equivalent increase, if they have 17 and goes to 18, means a 5.8% increase. And the associated cost was 1 million because of the line and other indirect costs. Not calculated, but it's expanded production facilities, to use more energy, more human resources, etc. On the other hand, they said, let's buy factory MES. So we made a pre-study with them, and we expect to increase around 6%. But the project investment was, let's say, around 10% the previous alternative, including software, hardware, sensors, PLCs, and the implementation. And with these two alternatives, they decided to buy factory. So we prepared the plan, and let's see what benefits they take. So we divided in two types: tangible, next please, and non-tangible. So in the tangible benefits, we can see that the increment of the productivity was not just 6%, rather than 8%, just the first year. So the equivalent lines we took was 1.36 new lines. But non-tangible, probably more important, is better customer satisfaction, because they comply the plans easily. Increase of personal involvement was also crucial, because helps them to increase the motivation and to arise new ideas to the plant, new projects to the plant, and then to build a continuous in process project and methodology. So they take better decisions due to more visibility and more information, and finally higher quality and reliability. So these guys were very happy to implement MES, and then after this first implementation, they grow in depth about how MES could improve their factory, not just the first year, rather than the next years. And basically, that's all I want to share with you. Billy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Miguel. That was an excellent overview of a real customer case study in Europe. Just to summarize, Miguel, I think some of the key things that I picked up from what you shared was moving from a manual process, an Excel or a paper-based process, to a digital process, and the benefits of streamlining that. The benefits to the operations as well as the executive team in terms of the dashboards, so they can actually see what is going on across the entire operations, including right at the factory floor level, and where the issues are, if any, and how quickly they can expedite that. You also covered things like shift and health checks and security. Some of the key things that I picked up on your Industrialization case study was actually exceeding the customer's original expectations in terms of productivity gains, in excess of 6% to 8% reality. So any business person who's on the line today would know what that means. 1% increment versus 8% increment. What does it do to you in terms of productivity gains? And then you also touched in terms of the investment versus the ROI, which was less than 6 months. And I've been in IT for a long time with Nigel and Ian on the line. Don't believe what you read in the brochures. It takes years in many, many cases. So I must congratulate you and the Aptean team that to get a ROI in less than 6 months. As a business person, I would be very excited about that. But last but not least is the customer satisfaction. Ultimately, if you're able to do this through this transformation program and satisfy your customers, then those customers are going to recommend you by word of mouth to other people to do that. So Miguel, once again, thank you very much for that. And we really appreciate you joining us from Madrid.
Thank you very much for you and attendance.
I just want to remind the attendees that, as Caroline said, there's a question and answer button. So if you haven't done that already, please go ahead and send through your questions, which we will look at towards the end of the session. So if you recap, we went through and Nigel set the scene in terms of the entire value chain around the food processing organization. Ian touched on the journey from where you are today as an as-is situation and how both Rifle Shot and Aptean can help you on this journey, one with the professional services and some of the methodologies that Ian shared with you, together with what Miguel has shared with you with the Aptean factory application. We will also touch a little bit more of this on the third session, where we'll drill down to the factory level in terms of operator equipment effectiveness and how you can improve your rates and your yields and your utilization, which ultimately will benefit your profitability in the organization. So Sarah, what I'd like to do, we're slightly ahead of time, but if there are any questions at this stage, the panel will address them.
Yeah, thank you, Dilly, very much for that presentation. There are a few questions that we have just starting to come in, so please keep sending your questions in. The first question that I'd like to ask is probably a good one for Miguel to answer. Does the factory MES solution have functionality highlight the impact of the downtime on the shop floor from a monetary perspective?
Yeah, that's right. So you can monitorize any stoppage, any slowdown. You can use, or you can consider also to create the improvement. So you can create new projects that match how you can reduce any variable. So the good thing in factory MES, in fact, is that you can see your factory in two levels. So the first one is what is happening now and what decision can I have now. And the second one is that you can see what was the result of my factory in the last, let's say, 6 months, and then take decisions in a more in a higher horizon, saying how can I improve because my results in the last 6 months was whatever. Some of our customers create new projects based on what's happening the last week, and some others decided where to put special attention based on the last shift. So it's like a factory MES allows you to facilitate any decision in a short, medium, and long term. I hope this answered your question.
Great, thank you, Miguel. Another question that we have is again around the factory MES solution, but what efficiency improvements could you typically see within the first year?
Well, that's difficult to answer because, to be honest, I should give a boundary. But I think that honestly, if I take control of all of our customers, the answer is between 5, let's say, to 10% improvement OEE the first year. Obviously, depend on the start point, how productivity the company at the very beginning, or if it's good or not very good. But basically, the first year can be this number 5 to 10. And we have made some studies in our customers, depending the sector, the industrial sector they are, if they are in bottling, if they are in food packaging or whatever, and we have create more or less how impact the implementation of factory will have, but to do the whole number 5 to 10.
Great, thank you, Miguel. There's another question for Nigel. Nigel, in your presentation, you mentioned employee training. Can you just explain a bit more about how that might fit in?
Okay, I think one, it can be a separate process. So just make sure you do have a process along with everything else of what training needs to be executed when. But another thing from a system point of view is the system can be built to provide alerts that alert employees when they need to do training. And that could be online. And as Miguel demonstrated, you can have those manuals online and available to operators and employees in real time as they're required.
Great, thank you, Nigel.
Thank you.
Another question that's come in is, if I already have an ERP system in my factory, can the ERP system and an MES system work together? And what are the integration points?
I don't know who is the this question comes, but if you allow me to answer, basically MES or factory MES is ERP agnostics. So this means that you can be integrate MES with any ERP. So there is not a problem. Probably a second question behind that is how difficult it is to do the interface, and the reality is that it's not complex because basically we linked items and jobs, that's all, and we can link the jobs with the ERP or with some scheduling tool the customer can have. So very easy to do the integration, preferred ERP, and a lot of integrations need to be done.
Thank you, Miguel. That's it for the questions for today. There are no further questions, so I think that concludes the Q&A session. So I'll hand back to Dilly to wrap up.
Yeah, so Sarah, I've received a few other questions as well. One of the questions was directed to Ian. If you could just chat a little bit around the services that Rifleshot provides to complement the app team technology, the product, including the map.
Just waiting for my video to come back on. Thanks, Tilly. So if we look at the services, we will help right from the beginning to build the value proposition, to build it so it will go through various different levels of approval for your organization, give you advice on what industry benchmarks are, what you should be looking for, I'll give you an example of somebody I've been working with relatively recently. They're in an acquisition mode, i.e. they're being bought out by a private equity company, but they couldn't justify their efficiency figures. It knocked their valuation down very dramatically. So not even basic efficiencies, let alone real OEE, your overall operating equipment efficiencies, with the OEE in there, they would have been able to show that this company has ability to grow 20% without capital investment. So that's an example of the exercise there. Once we've gone through the basics and there's budget approved on it, we spend time on the floor together with our OEM partners, in this case Apten, and look at what's happening, because you can learn a lot by observation. What is currently being done? And there may be in specific industries specific reasons for doing that. So you don't want change for change's sake, but having a look at what's being done allows you to then suggest improvements based on global expertise. And from there, you set the transformational thinking and get the buy-in, and that's critical. So that buy-in from the factory floor right up through management to drive it. Then you can affect the transformation. And let's be clear, if you want a different result, you've got to do different things. And if you don't want a different result, why are you even looking at any form of automation? If you're unhappy with your results, then there will be changes. Then as you go through the journey, things are going to look very different to it. So the actual implementation exercise is relatively easy, and that's what I'm trying to go through. It's your changes in processes. Once you've got the processes agreed upon, and you start building on the training, which was a question for Nigel, let's be clear that training is intimidating for many, many people, particularly on factory floors. They've done it this way for the last 10, 20, 30 years. Why should they change? You're asking them, you're effectively saying, hey guys, you'll be messing up with the change. And that may not be true. So persuading them, people across the organization, that this will be a better way is critical, and we assist with that. I mentioned preparing for surprises. You can't spend your life analyzing, so there will be surprises. There could be a downside. Maybe you affected a process and didn't take all the dimensions into account. We need to do that. And one of the most valuable things we do through the project management to this process is help everybody stay calm and stay the course. You're only going to get the results if you go the full course. Then lastly, it's critical to recognize the benefits as quickly as possible. So when you see changes that are happening that are going to be beneficial to the organization, we will guide you to recognize those and entrench them, because this entrenchment process is what makes the changes permanent. And then throughout it, you're of course measuring results. What results do you look for? Document root causes where you didn't get the results you wanted to, evaluate those, and a general guidance. And our objective at the end of the day is that the company will have moved up a level in terms of its own CMMI capability. I hope that answers the question. Quite a long answer.
Thank you, Ian. Sarah, I've got another question here, and this is directed to Miguel. Miguel, the customer says he is very impressed with the productivity improvements, and he's done a quick calculation. If he did this in his organization, it'll save him or benefit him by millions of rands. He also attended the previous session where there was a mention of, before I could go into the entire organization and implement, there was reference made of conducting a proof of value in about an 8-week period. Can you please explain to the customer on the line how you go about doing this proof of value?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the proof of value is we have prepared this scenario where companies want to ensure that that factory mesh meets their expectations. So in 7 weeks, we basically define in just one line what the benefits they can have. So we put sensors during the first week. No, excuse me. The first week we define exactly what's the model. The second week we preparing all the sensors. And the third week we began to run everything in the plant to ensure it's working and do the first training. So we deploy in the coming weeks, and we leave alone the customer running here their own site. Obviously, we can assist in remote, and finally, we present all the data to the high executives to ensure that we have met their expectations. Once they decided to approve this project, then we expand the same idea that we have done in the first line to the rest of the lines. So this is the proof of value, is a way to ensure that we meet their expectations in a controlled time, in a controlled cost. And this is having a lot of good impact in the industry and in our customers, because it's a very good way to ensure that factory mesh cover their expectations. Not sure if this answered the question.
Yeah,
if you want, Dilly, you and me can provide a small documentation about what these 7 weeks go, and with details about what is in each week.
Thank you, Miguel. So that's all the time we have for questions. We come towards the end of our session. I'd like to start off by thanking Nigel, Ian, and Miguel for presenting this morning. I'm sure you would all have benefited in some way from their input and their many years of experience in the food processing sector. I'd also like to thank the Aptean team in Cambridge, Sarah and her team, for organizing the logistics and the technology for today's presentation. I also like to thank the rifle shot team led by Caroline and her team, who've done an excellent job sending out all the invites. And last but not least, I'd like to thank all of you for making the time. I know you're attending a number of webinars in this COVID period, and you've taken the time to join us this morning. And I have no doubt that you would have benefited in some way. Our next session, as we mentioned at the onset, will be focused on the factory floor, focusing on improving efficiencies, effectiveness, and improving your bottom lines. Caroline and the marketing team from Rifle Shot will be in contact with you shortly with the date and time for the next session. On behalf of Rifle Shot, Aptean, MAP, and Medalla, once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us this morning, and stay safe.